It's one of the biggest battles of the session.
It's House Bill 3. It's education reform, and school finance has been the #1 topic of the session, and it's going to continue to be so.
The fight to fix how Texas pays for public schools is now in the hands of just 10 lawmakers. We'll bring you insight from 2 of them about the drive to reach a deal.
Yes.
Cheers in the Texas House as the clock struck midnight on hundreds of bills. We'll look at what died and what could still come back to life after a key deadline. Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen. The proposal to raise the state sales tax to pay to lower property tax bills will not move forward this legislative session. Steffi Lee reports the bill failed despite support from Governor Abbott.
Mr. Speaker, I move to postpone further consideration of HJR 3 until 12 noon on January 12, 2021.
Texas lawmakers could end this legislative session likely only slowing property tax growth. Top Republican leaders were exploring an idea they said would provide tangible results.
If we are able to pass a sales tax increase that will be dedicated to driving down property taxes, we're going to be able to leave this Capitol and inform our fellow Texans that their property tax bills next year are going to be less than they were this year.
But that effort faced roadblocks in the Senate school finance debate and now the House.
There were members of the Senate that have demanding property tax relief for their entire legislative careers that did not vote for the only bill that actually provided tax relief this legislative session.
I think that one reason it was proposed as a constitutional amendment was the idea of trying to get some buy-in or cover, perhaps from both Democratic members and then the public when it would go to a vote in November. But Democrats were not willing to help in that process.
Chairman Dan Huberty hopes this issue can be tackled 2 years from now.
Steffi Lee for State of Texas.
The Texas Senate approved a different approach to property tax relief. It counts on oil and gas tax revenue and future online sales tax as a way to lower school district taxes. Those ideas are in the Senate's version of the school finance bill, HB 3. That bill is now in the hands of a conference committee. Wes Rappaport spoke with one of the conferees who says that more changes are coming to that bill.
Here now with State Representative Ken King. Thanks for your time.
Glad to do it.
Wanted to just get a sort of a legislative update. What are some of the priorities that the chamber is looking at here as we get into crunch time?
Well, I believe the priority is the same as it's always been. It's House Bill 3. It's education reform, and school finance has been the #1 topic of the session, and it's going to continue to be so.
You're a busy guy. You're just recently appointed to the conference committee for House Bill 3. Essentially, for the folks at home, that's going to be you're going to be part of the House negotiation with the Senate on that bill, right?
That's exactly right.
And can you kind of explain, what some of the goals of those negotiations are? I mean, what is that process like?
Well, what's going to happen, there's 5 members from the Senate and 5 members from the House that are appointed to this conference committee. When we sent House Bill 3 to the Senate, they in turn put, I believe, 100 amendments on the original bill. So, and some of those amendments may be good, may be bad. We're just starting the conference process. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like yet, but I think it's safe to say most of what the Senate did to our bill will come off, and that's the purpose of the conference committee. And once the negotiated bill is finished by the conference committee, we'll bring it back to our respective houses and introduce it to the full Senate and the full, or in our case, the full House, and that will be the final product. I'm really optimistic that we're going to end up with still with a very good bill at the end of this process.
You heard Representative King say there are 5 House members on the HB 3 conference committee. We're joined by one of them right now, Democratic Representative Mary Gonzalez from Clint near El Paso. Great to see you this morning.
Happy to be here.
So you're on the conference committee, and you have now to work out the details on school finance with the Senate. What do you see as the biggest hurdle or the biggest negotiating point in that conference committee?
It's hard to say the biggest. There are so many details that are in the different versions of the bill. Everything from teacher merit pay, teacher pay raises, even the change of the basic allotment. I'm really looking forward, though, to working with the Senate. I think it's the first time ever since I've been a legislator that both the House and the Senate are committed to fully funding public education and making sure we're putting more money into our schools.
So you think both sides, the House and the Senate, understand that they have to agree and come out with a final product, or else the voters are just going to get the pitchforks out and come after y'all?
I think both sides agree that we need to be doing something for our kids and for our schools. I think this is actually less political and more a reality that we genuinely want to fix public education. And I think that really speaks as a testament of Speaker Bonin, who first issue said, "We will fix public education." His statements really set the tone for the entire legislature.
So the Senate, led by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, put in and changed HB 3 to mandate the $5,000 teacher pay raise across the board. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that will survive this conference committee?
I think the conversation about teacher pay raises will happen. The House did do something in our HB 3 version about pay raises. We did say, here, school districts, you're in charge. We're going to give you extra money and you determine how much and who gets that. We think that's a better solution, but we're happy to have the conversation with the Senate. Again, what's great is everybody at the table wants a school finance plan, and so we can work towards that, and to me there's nothing that we can't get through.
Is there something specific that or a perspective that you're going to bring to the conference committee, so an item or a policy that you're really going to make sure it gets in the final bill?
Definitely 3 things. First, special education funding. We know that we are underfunding our schools when it comes to special education. When we don't fund our schools in regards to the needs for special education, it's not that our schools don't do the services, is that they have to take money from other places and make sure that they're adequately doing the work they need to do. Second, full day pre-K. We know that when you give children the best foundation, they have the best opportunity to make it in life. And third, I really want to make sure that we raise the basic allotment, because we know that the foundation is, again, really important, and raising the basic allotment helps everybody.
Real quick, the House just went through a series of deadlines that killed a lot of bills. Did you lose anything that you really wanted to pass this session?
I didn't. I'm really lucky that most of my big bills got through the finish line early, and so it was surprising, though. We stayed till after midnight trying to get bills through, and normally the House kills bills on the last night. For the first time ever in my legislative career, we were working to get a lot of bills through, and there was really not trying to stall the process, but actually help the process get through.
So this session is uniquely different from other sessions when it comes to that. What do you think is the biggest takeaway so far from you?
This is my 4th session. I think my biggest takeaway is that really we're trying to work together across the aisle to get things done for Texas. It's very different than Washington. The Texas House works together, creates good policy, and really tries to make sure we're thinking about the future generation.
And last question from me, but at Memorial Day, you walk away and you say the legislature really had a good session. What needs to happen in the next final days for you to have that opinion?
We need to get public school finance done, and so I really hope that the Senate and the Senate comes to the table with good faith, because we are coming to the table with good faith.
Representative Gonzalez, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks. Hundreds of bills go down after a key deadline in the Texas House. Why do those exist, and then how does that kind of impact what goes forward?
Well, it exists so that we can watch a train wreck, Phil.
We turn to our panel for insight into the impact of the House bill deadline and a ban on red light cameras is closer to reality in Texas. Why the man behind the bill says the state needs to take the cameras down. A ban on red light cameras is closer to reality in Texas. House members voted to approve a bill by Bedford Republican Jonathan Stickland. He says tickets from those cameras violate your constitutional rights.
The burden of proof is on the person to prove that they're innocent, which is a complete upside down view of our judicial process and the notion that you are innocent until you're proven guilty.
While Stickland's bill cleared the House, the companion bill is still pending in the Senate, but it has support. A third of members signed on as co-sponsors. House lawmakers advanced 2 bills to improve natural gas line safety. Dallas Democrat Rafael Anchia wrote the bills after an explosion killed a young girl. One bill requires gas line operators to report incidents that cause death or serious injury to regulators at the Railroad Commission. The other would make companies replace steel and iron piping with plastic piping by the end of the next year. Those bills are now pending in the Senate.
Well, to put it in context, this is what I call Hell Week.
The clock struck midnight on hundreds of bills at the Texas Capitol. We'll look closer at the impact of the bill deadline and why some bills that didn't make it still have a chance. Cheers in the Texas House as the clock struck midnight on hundreds of bills, literally and figuratively. Midnight Thursday into Friday marked the deadline for bills to get a second reading in the House.
The process is designed to kill bills. It's designed to slow things down and to make sure that we're being deliberative about the policies and the laws that we pass in this building.
For insight, we turn to our roundtable. Carlos Sanchez is the senior editor for Texas Monthly. Matt Watkins is the breaking news editor for the Texas Tribune. And Bob Garrett is the Austin bureau chief for the Dallas Morning News. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Bob, let's start with you. This last week we saw a series of deadlines in the House that are meant to kill bills. Why do those exist, and then how does that kind of impact what goes forward?
Well, it exists so that we can watch a train wreck, Phil. Every second Thursday in May, we get, and every other year, we get to watch this. Basically, it's just a way of creating a funnel. There's so many bills that are passed, you have to have a way to manage it, and so you have to impose deadlines. Of course, as you know, things can be resurrected, Lazarus bills as a piggyback over in the Senate or later on, but a lot of the noises you heard were lots of little pet bills dying.
And Carlos, did anything major or important, any priorities for the leaders die this week?
Well, it wasn't in direct relation to the deadline, but I think the most significant component of the legislative session was the death of the sales tax initiative. There was, I believe, sincere belief on behalf of the leadership that the votes might have been there in both chambers. But just as suddenly as the notion that the votes existed, they disappeared. And the House is blaming the Senate, Senate's blaming the House. But the bottom line is one of the top priorities for the big three, the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker, it bit the dust this week. And
Matt, if I was looking and watching the legislature and I really wanted the tax bill to happen or another bill, are my hopes dashed? Is my priority done for the session for 2 years?
Well, it seems like the sales tax thing, there still might be avenues to kind of tack it on, but it doesn't really seem like anyone is going to make that effort to do it, at least at this point. Everyone has seemed pretty resigned this week that there might be other efforts. It might not look the exact same, but there will still be attempts to kind of lower property taxes and things like that. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that up until April, this wasn't really publicly seen as a big priority, and there are a lot of other big bills that are in pretty good shape right now. The budget, the school finance reform bill, the property tax bill that kind of seeks to limit increases, all of those have both passed both chambers and are kind of inching toward the finish line. So to get across the finish line, Carlos, what needs to happen with those kind of major priorities with the budget or the school finance and property taxes?
I think, as Matt said, those are in generally good shape. The real challenge, and this isn't a word that we've heard since maybe the 2005 session, is the notion of structural deficit. It's the notion that we have enough money in the bank right now to fund property tax cut for 1 year. But down the road, which is something that the governor really wants, is there a permanent source of revenue? The sales tax had been that avenue. It no longer exists. So there's some real challenges as to whether there will be a future revenue source for property tax relief.
And if I'm an outsider watching the legislature now, a lot of the big negotiations aren't really done in public view, right? These conference committees are kind of just wherever they exist. Can you kind of explain what
they never were they?
Yeah. What is for somebody who doesn't know, what is a conference committee, and what's the process look in that committee?
The Speaker of the House names 5 House members. The Lieutenant Governor names 5 senators. Those 10 people go off behind closed doors and hash out the differences. Theoretically, they are staying within the differences of the 2 bills, but they can come back and get permission to just go outside of the bounds, they call it, and do anything they want that fits the caption of the bill. So I agree with Carlos. I think that we're facing a possible long-term, non-sustainable property tax cut, but I think the political imperatives, Phil, now they are scraping under the cushions on the sofa. They're looking for every bit of money they can because the political imperative is next year, 2020, not funding this thing in 2024, 2028. They're worried about now.
And on that point, what are the electoral stakes, you think, in these last 3 weeks of the legislature? What are the voters going to be watching, Matt, and what are the leaders hoping that the voters are watching?
Well, I think this has been an interesting session because I think for the first time in a while, I think Republicans and especially the House have kind of been looking in both directions. 2018, Democrats did a lot better than expected. I don't know how realistic of the talk it is, but people have raised the possibility of could the House flip in future years. Meanwhile, there have been conservative groups, the Empower Texans of the world, the Tea Party groups that have kind of looked at some of these things that have been pushed and not liked the increases in spending that have come along with it. And so I think Republican leadership is kind of trying to walk a fine line here and kind of worried about pressure from both sides.
Is that kind of why we see hesitance across the whole country of taking on some of these big issues, school finance, property tax, because you're not going to please everybody and somebody's going to be upset at the end of the day?
Well, I think in many respects there was a boldness to the legislative priorities that were set out by the governor. The governor this session seems much more engaged. He seemed to want to bring in both the lieutenant governor and the House Speaker. In sessions past, I think there was a lot more acrimony that existed, and they seemed to want to underscore the kumbaya moments among the big 3. But the big question is to what effect this solidarity will produce positive legislative impact.
And Bob, anything else that you're watching the last couple of days that could change, flip the table over on everything?
Well, I don't think they're going to go to a special session because they have shared priorities of taking the somewhat disappointing aftermath of not getting the sales tax and now pivoting and saying, this was great. That would have been a cherry on top. You're going to hear that from the Abbott people and everybody else. But what we are doing is great, and they're going to try to sell it and hope that that's enough. If next year in the presidential election year of 2020, people are paying attention down ballot to these legislative races and aren't just voting on the basis of Trump or anti-Trump.
Well, Bob, Carlos, Matt, thanks for joining us this morning.
Always a pleasure.
Government, I feel like they have to step in. Otherwise, people are just gonna keep dying.
Texas lawmakers take new steps to combat opioid addiction, how they're targeting the problem, and why one recovering addict says it won't be easy. State lawmakers passed 2 bills that take aim at painkiller addiction. One changes how the state tracks prescriptions. The other focuses on treating addiction. Wes Rappaport introduces us to one man fighting addiction and how lawmakers could make a difference.
I was born this way. I didn't choose to be a dope fiend.
Boomer Mackay has been through a lot for a 19-year-old.
I was able to keep it up so long because I would go to my doctor, I would bold-faced lie, and then it was so easy to get the drugs.
A few stints in rehab, he's now living in a sober house in Central Texas.
Good, people are dying all the time. We have Narcan in our laundry room and in every car. It's not a joke.
As lawmakers try to rein in opioid abuse in Texas, they're targeting the prescription monitoring program, which helps medication prescribers and pharmacists track controlled substance history of their patients.
We need as many doctors as possible to be doing this, and that helps cut down on the doctors that we know are not part of the problem and helps isolate those who are part of the problem, so we can pursue them better.
Another tool in the toolbox, a proposal in the House that would update the state's health programs to include a stronger focus on substance use disorders and increase awareness of opioid risks.
With this one, we are putting a lot more emphasis on research related to the opioid addiction, a lot more emphasis on telehealth and the treatment of it.
Mackay, who has now been sober for 70 days, says Texas should treat drug abuse as a disease.
My objective every time is to just get absolutely obliterated. That's sick thinking. That's terrible. Why would anybody choose that? Like, it's not as simple as just stop.
I'm Wes Rappaport for State of Texas.
The National Institute on Drug Abuse says in 2017, opioids contributed to more than 1,400 overdose deaths in Texas. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.